Hello, everyone. This is Bible Perspective. I am Brother Ryan Bowling. Thank you all for joining me. This is a channel where we analyze current events from a biblical and prophetic point of view. May I also add that we look at things from a biblically spiritual point of view. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about today is a article that I read in Christian Post that was pretty disturbing, but I also see some things here in the spiritual area that the spiritual forces can use and is using to keep the people divided against each other so that he can keep us without any power. And what I'm talking about here is an alleged incident that happened in the school system where a 10-year-old boy allegedly groped and this is a Christian, channel. So if you got any kids though, you might not want them to hear this, but it is, it's reality. He supposedly groped these teacher's breast, and now she's accused. The boy ended up getting suspended from school, and there's this big hoopla going on that unfortunately involves race. So let's get into this. Let's get into this article and let's dissect this. And the article says the family of a 10-year-old Florida boy who was suspended after a counselor at Holy Hill School in Vallesia County reported to police that he inappropriately cupped one of her breasts during a hug, is now demanding an apology from the school, the clearing of the boy's record, and that the counselor be fired. We will not stand by this and allow him to be accused of something he did not do, Ed Hollins, the boy's grandfather, said at a virtual press conference Monday morning, according to the Daytona Beach News Journal. I would not stand for my grandchild or any child to be treated this way by a professional. This is a new way of lynching. You see the words being used here? Now, you may be wondering what's going on here. Let's read further. And then you're going to see. The child, who is black, is not being identified because he's a minor. The counselor, who is white, has evoked Marsy's law, which allows alleged crime victims in Florida to remain anonymous, NBC News reported. While police have not yet charged the boy with any crime, he is facing a potential misdemeanor battery charge as a result of the counselor's claim. Now, before anybody starts jumping into conclusions about this, I'm going to read this article. In fact, I'm going to read all this article so we can get the crux of what this is about. And then I'm going to give my opinion, my spiritual opinion. Details from a police report and a suspension letter provided by attorneys for the boy's family alleged that on October 24th, the counselor said she was visiting a class to discuss something when the student approached her for a hug. The teacher explained that she, quote, turned sideways to give a side hug. But the boy placed one arm around her shoulder and with the other hand, quote, reached and grabbed her left breast. The suspension letter said. She then noted that she removed the boy's hand from her breast and he walked away. The report explained that when the primary teacher in the classroom who did not witness the incident but tried to talk to the student about the allegation, he, quote, began yelling and kicking things and stormed off. The boy then had to be removed from the classroom by school staff, and his grandmother was later informed of his suspension by the assistant principal. An expulsion was also reportedly considered for the boy, whose family pastor, Cynthia Williams, described as loving, kind, honest, and well-mannered. The school, however, did not have sufficient grounds to pursue that route. His family is now challenging the counselor's version of the alleged incident, which has no other witnesses. That really hit me really hard that a mental health specialist could accuse my grandson of that. And then the wording that she used, it was so graphic, like he's some kind of sex maniac or something. It's like, this really hurts. Look, Lakeisha Hollins, the boy's grandmother, told the News Journal. His father, who is not being identified to protect the minor, said his son asked if people would now see him as a, quote, monster, rather than himself when he returns to school after his family meets with school officials. The situation has become so difficult, the family has requested that the boy be placed in a different class and have no contact with the counselor. The family's attorney, Rossi Williams, and West Valencia NAACP President Sean King Here we go. Argued that the boy is among many black students who have been disproportionately and more severely punished by the Vasily County school system. It says, over the next 2 years of being president, this is a weekly call that I'm getting the situation of this nature, especially with the Vasily County school system, where our black and brown kids are put on the wrong end of every situation. And no matter how you confront the issue, it continues to happen, King said. Williams noted that even if the boy accidentally touched a counselor, the discipline based on guidance from a document on the school's district's discipline procedures was not, quote, restorative and logical. I don't know exactly what that means. And that's the end of that article right there. Very controversial situation, very volatile situation. And let's be real. When you watch the news and you look at the politics and everything is about race. Race this, race that, race this. Here's my judgment on this. Let's look at this from what I've read and from what I can gather. But a lot of what my opinion is not going to be popular, and it's not going to be based on what a lot of people think. This is based on my own reading the research of others and seeing other sides of the scenario. Now, does racism still exist in this country? You'd be crazy not to believe it doesn't. Of course it does. It exists all over the world. Why? Because looking at it spiritually, I said this in the previous video. When Adam disobeyed God, not only did his disobedience corrupt his nature and all of humanity's nature, and we inherited a sin nature, okay, but it also corrupted all of creation. But dealing with the sin nature, racism is one of the effects of the sin nature. Racism is when you define, let's deal with the definition of racism. Racism, according to the textbook definition, is when an individual or group of individuals consider another individual or another group of individuals to be inferior to them in different areas. That's what racism is in its strictest sense. Now, looking at this situation, could we say that this was a race-related situation? Possible or possibly not. We don't know. We don't know. Or I say I don't know. I can't say whether or not it was race-related because the article mentions that the boy was black and the counselor was white. So right off the bat, when unfortunately, and this is an unfortunate situation in America, particularly among a significant number of black people, when we see something like that, a lot of times the first thing comes to our mind is this is racial. Because we've been so inundated with racial topics that we don't know. When I say we, I mean in general. I'm not saying anybody here on this channel is watching this or anyway, but we've been so inundated with things being racial if it involves a white person that we don't know what else to think. And what I want to put out there on a physical surface level is that a lot of times it's not always race related. In this particular incident, in the article, it states that I think the NAACP president person said that this particular school has disproportionately marginalized many of the blacks in that particular school. And on a surface level, that's probably true. That there are a lot of black students that tend to get the brunt of the disciplinary actions in that school. But could it be that the problem isn't because the school officials are picking on these black students because they're black? Could it be that unfortunately a lot of these black students that are being disproportionately marginalized are being so because of their behavior? To give you an example, where I work at Cleveland downtown, right? As I do security there at Cleveland downtown, Tower City. I do security, bike patrol. A significant number of the people that give us the most problems at Tower City is black. 90%, at least 90% of them are black that give us these kind of problems. They cuss us out. They call us all kinds of names and all the rest. They resist, do all the stuff that, you hear in the news. That's what they do. When I was going to school, when I was in high school, okay, when I was in high school, and during the busing period, where the politicians decided that they was going to be the great arbiters of righteousness and truth and decided to bus black students from the inner city over into the suburbs and schools in the suburbs with the idea of giving them a better education. Well, they bust me and a group of other blacks over to this school called Charles Mooney, which was mostly predominantly white. It was on the west side. A significant number of the students in that school were black because they had been bused over there. Things started going downhill. Now, I'm just telling you from my observations and my experiences, okay? So take it the way you would want. A significant number of things went downhill. What do I mean by that? There was fights every time I turned around, and most of these fights involved blacks. What I personally observed was blacks attacking whites, beating up on whites. What I personally observed was blacks being in the classroom, not wanting to pay attention. What I personally observed was blacks getting in trouble all the time. Were they getting in trouble because they were black? No. They wasn't coming to class. They weren't doing the work. They was causing troubles in the classroom. It was them. Just so happened that they were black. So if they were marginalized not because they were black. They were marginalized because they were the key troublemakers that just happened to be black. So the same situation here. It could be that these group of youth in this particular school are marginalized not because they're black, but they're marginalized because, unfortunately, most of the bad behavior may be coming from them. But we don't know for sure. My point is this. Let me give you the spiritual point. As long as the enemy, and when I say the enemy, I mean the spiritual forces. The Bible teaches in both the Old and New Testament that Lucifer or Satan, whichever one you prefer to call him, because his name was Lucifer when he was in heaven. When he got kicked out of heaven, his name became Satan, which means adversary. Adversary of God's people, adversary of all of humanity. When he was in heaven, his name was Lucifer. That means light bearer. He's not bearing any light right now. I don't care what you want to, you can call him Lucifer, but he's not a light bearer. He's all darkness. He's an adversary. He may pose himself as a light bearer, but he's lying to you. Now, this is what the Bible defines as as our true enemy, a fallen angel. Okay? Not the white man, not the black man, not the Hispanic, a fallen angel who's our true enemy. Now, as long as Satan can keep the masses divided over racial issues, he will continue to do so. As long as he can keep people hating on each other, he will continue to do so. Now, and the rest of that article mentioned I think it was a grandfather was the pastor of this young boy. Now, I didn't go into detail as to all the things that this pastor had said, but except to say that this young boy was loving and kind and so forth. And he probably was. And this probably was a mistake. And it could have been that maybe perhaps the counselor may have been thinking, well, you know, a lot of these young boys from the inner city or these young blacks are overly sexualized and he did this on purpose. Who knows? Who really knows? But the point is that this pastor, I pray that this pastor sees this from a spiritual perspective as well. Because everything isn't racial, but the enemy, the real enemy, will use race to keep us divided against each other. As long as he can keep the ethnic groups, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, and all the rest divided against each other, it will be easier for him to create his one world government, one world religion, and one world economic system recorded in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, chapter 17, and chapter 18. It's in the Bible. Also read Daniel, the 7th chapter is in there too. A one world government. One of the reasons why it's going to be so easy for Satan to push this kind of stuff is because he's going to keep us divided over things like this. I believe that Christians should try their best to not reject reality, obviously, but to try their best under the anointing of the Holy Spirit to try to come together and try to fix these situations on a spiritual basis as well as a physical basis. Because as long as the enemy continues to do this, we're going to continue to keep having these problems. Our war is not in the three-dimensional realm. It's in the unseen realm. I'm going to end this video on this. Ephesians 6th chapter. We wrestle not, Paul said, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, spiritual wickedness, and spiritual demonic spirits in high places. This is what we're wrestling against. This is what our real war is against. It's against entities, very powerful entities in the unseen realm. It's not against this person who you think may be racist. It's not against this person here you think may think you inferior. It's against the spiritual forces operating in that person. And whether that person is racist or not, when you look at the real source of what's energizing that person, then you'll be able to address it the right way. Everything, let me sum this video with this. Everything is not race related. The way I say it. It's not all racial. But as long as the enemy can keep it that way, he's going to keep us divided. So that's what I wanted to say here. What do you guys think about this situation? You think that this was intentional? Do you think the boy intentionally did this? Do you think the teacher who was white, the counselor who was white, do you think this person was racist? I don't think so, because I don't have all the details. So I don't really know. But I know the spiritual side, as long as the enemy keeps this before us, he's going to keep us divided. And he can create his kingdom that's coming. So that's my words on it. That's my comment on it. What do you guys think? Comment, like, and share. God bless you all. See you again.